Dear Mr. President of the Government of Hungary, dear Viktor, I would like to thank you for your official visit today, which confirmed the above standard friendly relations between our countries, but also the current relations between us personally. First of all, I would like to appreciate, dear Mr. Prime Minister, that we have contributed to good Slovak-Hungarian and Hungarian-Slovak relations in the last 10 to 15 years, because today there are no open political issues that would disturb us. Moreover, it is worth mentioning that in case of necessity, we are prepared to sit down as the presidium of the government and resolve the possible disputes. I am pleased that the citizens of the Hungarian nationality living in Slovakia live in good cooperation with the citizens of the Slovak Republic, and whenever I have the opportunity to visit this part of Slovakia, I feel that we have done a lot together for the good coexistence of people living in Slovakia. Ladies and gentlemen, I had a private conversation with Mr. Prime Minister first, and then we had a private conversation in delegations. I would like to start with bilateral relations, which I consider to be problem-free. I repeat, I am very pleased that we are enjoying a period of excellent relations, understanding and cooperation. At this point, I would like to thank Mr. Prime Minister for his cooperation when it comes to energy supplies for Slovakia, because gas flows through Hungary today. I also appreciate that the Hungarian government and Mr. Prime Minister are behind the scenes of the refurbishment and supply of gas through Ukraine to the west, which is extremely important for Slovakia and for the whole of Europe. We have exchanged information in the area of nuclear energy, where Slovakia is very far away, because today a significant part of the electricity we consume in Slovakia is produced in nuclear power plants. I am pleased that there is cooperation between renowned Slovak companies in this area, and the project of this type, which is being implemented in Hungary. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to international issues, since July 1st this year, Hungary has become the presiding country of the B4. I asked Mr. Prime Minister to do everything in the world he could to revive this exceptionally important regional cooperation. The cooperation within the B4 was intentionally destroyed, liquidated, because the big players in the European Union did not accept the existence of regional cooperation in the European Union, which represented more than 60 million inhabitants and ensured that these four countries were able to influence their own national interests. I promised Mr. Prime Minister Orbán that I would support him in all his efforts when it comes to the renewal of the functioning of this rare, unique regional cooperation. We have the same opinion on many issues within international politics. We support the immediate end of the war in Ukraine. We reject all military operations aimed at prolonging this war. We believe that the extraordinary activity carried out today by the U.S. administration will lead to good results, and that we will be able to jointly look forward to peace in Ukraine. I would like to highly appreciate the sovereign position of the Hungarian government, as well as the position of Mr. Prime Minister, which often represents the protection of its own Hungarian national interests, even on the basis of the European Union. As I stand here, I repeat once again, as the President of the Government of the Slovak Republic, I will never agree that anyone in the European Union should be punished for his sovereign position. I will never agree with any procedures that would lead to the punishment of those who do exactly what they promised their own voters, who act sovereignly, and who defend their own national interests. This is a position that the Slovak Republic will never abandon. I will not burden you, ladies and gentlemen, with the various detailed topics we have discussed. I will start with cooperation in the area of defense, cooperation in other areas, where Slovakia and Hungary have long demonstrated the ability to find common solutions. However, I can confirm today with great joy that the efforts and energy that we have invested together with Mr. Prime Minister Orbán in the high quality of the Slovak-Hungarian and Hungarian-Slovak relations have proven to be extraordinary. I would like to thank Mr. Prime Minister for this. Mr. Prime Minister, dear Viktor, once again, even if you leave the territory of the Slovak Republic for a while, welcome to Slovakia. You will always be welcome here, just as we feel when we come to Hungary. I am looking forward to further and further fruitful cooperation. We are already matadors in politics. You are even older than me. I would like to say to all our enemies, as I have perceived you today, that we still have a lot of energy. We have a lot to offer, and I believe that as matadors, we will continue to do so in national politics, as well as in European politics. We are people who have a sovereign attitude. We believe in the existence of national states of sovereignty. I personally also believe that the European Union is a good living space for us. However, the development that we are currently observing in the European Union is not the most favorable. We will have to deal with many challenges, such as the question of the cancellation of the veto law. I cannot imagine that the European Union would function on the principle of the decision of large, strong states, decisions that would then have to be respected by smaller states. We have a common stance when it comes to migration. I think that so far the European Union has forgotten something, and that is to thank Hungary for how Hungary fought against illegal migration. We have a common stance not only when it comes to the military conflict in Ukraine, but also on other issues. Therefore, these are the things that connect us, will connect us, and it will always be a great pleasure for me, dear Viktor, to welcome you to Slovakia, and I believe that it will also be a pleasure for you to visit Hungary. Once again, welcome to Slovakia and thank you for your visit.
Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, dear Mr. Prime Minister, dear Robert, without any exaggeration, we can say that we currently live in a system of the best Slovak-Hungarian relations of all time. It was necessary to make many brave decisions, and that is why we want to thank the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Mr. Robert Fico, for his friendship and for all the initiatives that, in the name of friendship between the two countries, he carried out in the past. Dear Robert, if someone had told me 15 years ago that we would be standing here and talking together in front of our two countries in this tone, probably few people would have believed that it is possible. I would also like to confirm at this moment that Slovakia and Slovaks will always be able to rely on us, and we, Hungarians, also rely on Slovakia because our two countries have a number of common interests. I would like to confirm that Slovak minority groups or communities living in Hungary are considered an organic part of our population, and we will do everything to preserve their national identity. I would also like to mention that our trade balance exceeds 15 million euros. Slovakia is the third most important trading partner of Hungary. Both countries are modern industrial countries. Slovakia is a modern industrial country, and that is why it is our common interest that the Salt War does not weaken our economy. Today, we discuss three main issues in detail, namely the issue of peace, sovereignty, and energy supplies. I would like to confirm what Prime Minister Fico said, and that our job in Europe should be to welcome American peace initiatives, because the fact that Russian-American negotiations have already begun means that the escalation of the war in Pripyat has already stopped. A continuation of the negotiations reduces the potential escalation of the military conflict. I am convinced that this situation does not have a military solution, and that is why we should support peace initiatives in Europe. Over the past few years, we have cooperated. Robert mentioned several events in the past, for example, in the area of stopping illegal migration. I am convinced that no one can limit our sovereignty in the area of migration policy. No one can decide in the Hungarian and Slovak Union who we want to live with. Who we want to live with, or do not want to live with, must remain our decision based on national sovereignty. In the Hungarian Union, I can state that we are against migration, and we do not want to sacrifice the future of our children as a result of the wrong migration policy when it comes to energy supplies. I fully agree with the Prime Minister that it is really worth considering that Ukraine is blocking the supply of natural gas. We believe that this is not the way to the future. So it will be very difficult for Ukraine to get closer to the European Union. We should show a much greater degree of understanding to our neighbors and to our countries, and to improve our economic interests. I would like to remind you that the capacity of these two countries has already increased to 3.5 million cubic meters. We have agreed that we will continue to increase it. We have also agreed that we must continue to ensure that these purchases are without sanctions. In conclusion, I would like to say a few words about bilateral cooperation. We have agreed that it will be necessary to carry out regular development activities. I remember that in the spirit of our previous agreements, we agreed on 22 border crossings. They were not original. Now we have increased them to 40. But now we will need to build 3 new roads, 3 new bridges, and border crossings. And we want to renovate some of them. In conclusion, I would also like to confirm that it was a great honor for me not only to be able to visit Slovakia, but it will also be a great honor for Hungary when the Prime Minister accepts my official invitation and comes to visit Budapest. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Petr Madro, Radio Journal. You are both calling for a significant reform of the EU and strengthening of national sovereignty. How do you want to ensure that such an approach will not weaken the common European values, the legal state, and the unitary approach to the threat from abroad, such as Russia? And I would also like to touch on the Slovak-Hungarian relations. How are the negotiations on the water part of Gabčíkov and Nadmaroš going? In the question of the Hague Resolution, I would like to ask if you are also counting on green energy supplies from Slovakia to Hungary. And Mr. Orbán, how do you see?
Thank you very much. I asked you, Mr. Editor, to ask him a question. All right, we will answer. Thank you very much. And who will go first? I would like to start. Mr. Editor. Yes, we are talking about the prime ministers who have critical views on the functioning of the EU. And I will use your question on a problem called the law of veto. Look, what is the magic and power of the EU? When will the EU be strong? Power. The EU will be strong when, in the variety of opinions and views it has, 27 member states can reach an agreement. Sometimes I am shocked. We come to an agreement, and we are not agreed on anything. It is 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Such a moment comes, and we agree on something. That is power. The EU will be strong if it respects the sovereign position of the member states. The EU will be strong if it returns to respecting the values of democracy and the rule of law, because it is not always like that. If we look at the years 1920 to 1923 in Slovakia, when the opposition was literally liquidated and the EU was silent, it was not a nice view of the organs of the EU. It is not a nice view when we are silent about what is happening in Serbia, what is happening in Georgia, how the West is organizing the Maidens, the legitimate governments that function in these states. That is why we often correctly open the topics that concern the functioning and future of the EU. I was very pleasantly surprised when in one of his last speeches, the outgoing German Chancellor said that it is inevitable to change the basic contracts, and that it is necessary to introduce the possibility of deciding on the majority qualified in essential issues. So imagine, Mr. Editor, that there will be a question of war in Ukraine and large states that support the war would accept this topic. We do not support it. Neither Hungary nor Slovakia. And they would say that we now have to raise, I think, a sum of 100 billion to support Ukraine, and it will be qualified to vote on it. And we would have to stand by the fact that we are fulfilling our duty, or the decision is accepted by the majority qualified. Or imagine that we would decide by the majority qualified without our consent that the obligatory quotas for illegal migrants will be introduced. Hungary will get 30,000. We will get 15,000 illegal migrants that we have to place without our consent on our territory and take care of them. This is the end of the European Union. Therefore, on the contrary, I would welcome if big players in the European Union welcomed sovereign attitudes, pragmatic approaches. Perhaps by the fact, Mr. Prime Minister, that we have also experienced a period of socialism until 1989-90. We are more pragmatic. We saw other regimes. We saw what worked and didn't work. Therefore, I would like to challenge all decision-makers in the European Union to listen to us. Don't take steps that can lead to the liquidation of the EU. The abolition of the VAT law is a step towards the abolition of the EU. I am 100% convinced of this. For the Slovak Republic, I would like to say that we will never, I repeat, never agree with any of the fundamental changes that would lead to such a step. I will repeat what I said in my initial speech. Mr. Editor-in-Chief, when the U.S. Vice President said at the Munich Security Conference that the biggest problem in Europe is that the EU is betraying its own values. But that's true. But is it really necessary for anyone to talk about these words? How can there be a discussion on this topic? And I am not a defending lawyer of the Hungarian Mr. Viktor Orbán. Viktor is, by the way, strong and experienced, and Hungary is strong and experienced. How can anyone even think that for the sovereign existence of the EU, we will prepare some procedures that have to limit the voting rights, and that may lead to a different membership of a given state? I am not talking about Hungary now. I am talking about the theoretical position. This is the end of democracy. Double standard. How is it possible that we are still not prepared for the EU? Albania, Mr. Editor-in-Chief, is better prepared for the EU than Ukraine. The biggest tragedy will be when the political decision will be made, and it will be said that all these states that have been preparing for the EU for many years will be stopped, so that we can accept Ukraine that is not even prepared for the EU. We are supporting the access to the EU. I am talking about Slovakia. We are supporting this. There are many issues where I ask the EU representatives to listen to us and not to dictate to us. I was shocked by the statement of the High Representative of the EU to the Foreign Ministry, Ms. Kaja Kallas, when she told me, or refused, that the visit of anyone in Moscow will not be taken into consideration. But Ms. Kallas is not my High Representative. I am the President of the sovereign state. If we are to go to a period when someone will dictate to us whether we can go there or not, then we are done. The EU has always been embellished when different opinions were respected, when there was a discussion, when consensus was sought. What is happening today in some areas is something that the EU puts in a very negative light. Despite this, this is a sovereign Hungarian policy. We have our own sovereign Slovak policy. Despite this, I think that our voices are very useful in the EU in various situations.
If you allow me, I would like to add one more thing to what the Prime Minister said regarding the right to vote and unanimity. Imagine that if we did not have the principle of unanimity and the possibility to represent our positions, we could be dragged into a war, and our nations would not want that. We cannot give up, because that would mean the end of the sovereignty of our nations. If I understood correctly, your question was also philosophical when you mentioned the common values of the EU. It is not only about values, but also about interests. The EU has 27 member states and 27 interests. All kinds of inattentive changes in competence deprive individual member states of their rights and powers. We do not want that. We want Brussels to express the same respect for our interests, not only symbolically. As far as the philosophical aspect is concerned, if I understood correctly, how could we guarantee the values of the EU if individual nations wanted to have sovereignty? Our answer is that Brussels does not guarantee sovereignty for us. It is not that Brussels is the guardian of democracy. On the contrary, Brussels is a bureaucracy, and bureaucrats are not friends of democracy. Bureaucrats are friends of bureaucracy. Democracy is not in Brussels, but in member states. Therefore, it is not Brussels that guarantees democracy in Hungary or Slovakia. On the contrary, we in Hungary and Slovakia guarantee democracy against Brussels. That is how I would interpret it.
Good afternoon. I am Laszlo Mészáros from M1. I would like to ask Prime Minister Orbán and your colleague, Mr. Robert Fitz, if you are always effective in opposing Brussels. As you can see, due to the war and illegal migration, what are the possibilities and potentials that could still be used?
First of all, there is no doubt that the Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic and I have our own government. If necessary, we will stand up for it. At the same time, Slovakia has its own political culture, and that is why we do it directly. Not in marches, not behind the scenes, but we clearly express the interests of our countries. We think it is morally right to define our national interests, and that is how we speak in individual discussions as self-aware representatives of our countries. I do not think that we cooperate and speak only in the interests of our own countries. We are members of the European Union, and there are many opportunities where we propose proposals together or separately for constructive solutions to certain issues. For example, we have already proposed many Green Deal proposals to ensure reasonable prices and procedures. For example, the Prime Minister has already proposed many times the integration of nuclear energy into energy policy. Not only do we speak in the interests of our countries, but also constructively in other directions. For example, we have a nuclear war. We have a clear proposal to avoid the European-American nuclear war. Our proposal is to reduce the industrial costs by 2.5%. If this is done, we think we could avoid a nuclear war between the US and Europe. So we have various proposals. We would be happy if you could see not only the symbol of national sovereignty and resistance, but also constructivity. We are members of the European Union because our country, in the interests of Hungary and Slovakia, is on a successful trajectory. The question is not only how we can reduce the costs, but also how we can propose constructive proposals.
I would like to add to what Prime Minister Orbán said. I think it is a good thing that there are member states in the European Union that put emphasis on their national interests and sovereignty. I hope I am not exaggerating. We often talk at the meetings of the European Council about the munitions caliber 155 for Ukraine and about energy prices. And it was the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who is standing next to me, who repeatedly says that we should put specific proposals on the table when it comes to energy prices. What do we want to do with them? Electricity, gas. Because if we compare it with the United States, China, and India, the prices are incomparable. That is why I would like to ask you not to think that we are some kind of. I hope it will be a good expression in Hungarian, that we are doing bad things in the European Council. We are people who have a long-term responsibility for our country as a world power, and we will continue to open these questions, whether someone likes it or not. The greatest danger, Mr. Editor-in-Chief, for the European Union is if there are governments who will agree with one single political and obligatory opinion in the European Union. One single political and obligatory opinion is that we need to support the war on Ukraine. Whenever this topic starts, we look at each other, and we know that we are on the opposite side. Now imagine that in Slovakia, I am not allowed to speak about Slovakia. I am not allowed to interfere in the internal affairs of Hungary. There will be politicians who nod like this. Do you remember that in those cars we had a dog with a head like this? The dog always nodded like this when we were walking in those cars. The previous government we had here agreed with everything, just to have peace and quiet. We gave up all airplanes, we gave up the anti-aircraft defense system. Mr. Editor-in-Chief, Slovakia does not have a protected nuclear power plant. Of course, the European Union sees that it has such a government in Slovakia, and it gave up everything. It even gave up the fact that the opposition leaders were locked up. I was 4 times accused of political crime. I was 5 centimeters from the line. Therefore, the biggest tragedy of the Union will be when politicians from the EU nod like this on everything. I think that our work in the Union is very useful. We are the ones who support diversity here. We are the ones who say that a different opinion is needed. Because if we agreed with everything, the European Union would not be able to function today. The European Union has a great perspective. I will not hide the fact that I had great victories in personal nominations when it came to the High Representative of the European Union for International Relations. I said it very openly. Now the German Chamber of Commerce and others have also called me. I had great victories in this. And today it is confirmed. Do not be angry with me, High Representative of the European Union for International Relations. But how can it happen, dear Viktor, that we are talking on the basis of the European Council about who will represent us in the peace negotiations between the United States, Russia, and the European Union? And there is a High Representative who herself had to say, "But I am here, I am determined to do these things." How can it happen that she travels to the United States and no one wants to meet her? So we are facing a serious question. It is a question of personal choice. What kind of people will represent the European Union? What will be the capacity? What will be the sovereignty? What will be the image of the European Union? I will not leave this path. I have been in politics for too long, so that I would now go to the extremes of everything. And there will be topics where we will have fundamentally different opinions. In 2027, the European Union wants to end any transfer of energy from the Russian Federation. It is totally nonsense. This will only lead to further high prices and further decrease of the competitiveness of the European industry. We have other topics. As far as the Migration Pact is concerned, it does not work, it is not good, it brings us absolutely nothing. I am glad that Slovakia, similarly to Hungary, had a negative attitude to this pact. There are a lot of topics. I would like to ask the other member states of the European Union not to perceive us as someone who wants to destroy something. On the contrary, we want to come with our proposals. We come with proposals. We do not say no. We do not go there just to shout no. We always have a proposal. We propose that these proposals are for the benefit of the European Union and not against the European Union. In any case, I would like to thank you for the great interest of the media that you have expressed in this regard. Thank you very much.